네, 안녕하세요.
Yes, hello everybody. So I will be the moderator for this session titled The Golden Age of US Policies. I'll be the moderator. So I would like to just say hello in Korean first. Hello everyone.
이미 여러분께서 잘 알고
As all of you well know, the theme for this year's UDC 2025 is blockchain to the mainstream. I'm wondering how much you believe the blockchain have become part of the mainstream, or how far we have come. I actually host a show called Money at a channel, and we tackle various content using virtual assets and crypto. And if we look at the frequency of uploads of these topics, as far as I can understand, I still believe that it has not necessarily become the mainstream yet. Well then, in order for the blockchain to really make its way into the heart of everything, what do you think is the most important thing? Of course, it would be the applications, the reception in among the general public. But today, I would like to talk about the regulations and the policies in the respective countries and in which direction they're headed, whether or not this would bode well for the future of crypto. Let's take the US, for instance. With the launch of the Trump administration, we've seen very stark improvements in digital policies. The administration is definitely pro-crypto, and this is at the heart of our attention. So in this panel, we would like to talk about many relevant topics with the people who are at the forefront of these movements, people who were in the United States just days ago, people who are experiencing everything on the ground. So once again, thank you so much for being here. And one thing that I would like to ask of you is that we will be having a Q&A for about 10 minutes at the end of our panel discussion. So I hope that you will be preparing your questions by then so that we'll be able to take your questions through the receivers. So we have a very brief background or a profile of our panels in the background here. First, right next to me, we have Mr. Kevin Bate, partner of Delta Strategy Group. Delta Strategy Group provides advice to the United States administration regarding economic and policy issues. So he definitely has the best understanding regarding legislative procedures.
to the
Sure.
audience.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Kevin Bate. I'm a partner at Delta Strategy Group. We're a Washington, D.C. based regulatory strategy and government affairs firm. I've played a role as a US and UK based regulator, and I've worked in the digital asset space for over a decade now. And I believe our firm was the first firm in Washington, D.C. to lobby on behalf of digital asset companies in the halls of Congress. I want to thank Upbit and Dunamu for hosting us here today. Upbit has played a pivotal role in the global development of digital assets, and so it's a real honor to be here today.
네, 감사합니다. 그리고 그 옆에는
And also, to his left, we have CEO of GBBC, Sandra Ro. GBBC, of course, you well know the company. It is a player on the global front, a nonprofit. So,
Everyone, my name is Sandra Ro. I'm the CEO of the Global Blockchain Business Council, GBBC. We are a Swiss-based nonprofit association based in Geneva, Switzerland, and we were launched during Davos in 2017, so now we're almost 9 years old. And we focus on education, especially for government and regulators and executives of some of the largest corporations in the world, but also to make sure that we are bringing together stakeholders from around the world. As you know, this technology is global and does not respect borders. And so we do our best to help connect the dots around the world. And I'm currently based in Washington, D.C.
네, 그리고 last but not least, 트리시 터너, 크립토택스.
And last but not least, we have Trish Turner, Director of Tax at CryptoTaxGirl, and the Asset Reality VP in the public sector. Very recently, she was a part of IRS as the executive manager, and she, I believe, will be able to deliver the latest stance at the IRS.
Hi, my name is Trish Turner, and I have transitioned from the Internal Revenue Service. Now I am the Director of Tax at CryptoTaxGirl, or CTG. That is one of my roles, supporting both taxpayers in preparing their tax returns and giving them advice and advisory role there, as well as representing defensible positions for them. In addition to that, I am also VP Public Sector for Asset Reality. Asset Reality provides a custody solution for the public sector, providing transparency into assets that are seized, helping governments liaison assets in those situations. Again, thank you for having myself and the rest of the team. I'm really happy here to share what we have today.
네, 샌드라 같은 경우에는
As for Trish, it's her first visit to Korea, so we should be able to welcome her with a big round of applause, everybody. A big round of applause for Trish.
네, 그러면 패널 토의를
But then I'd like to kick off the panel discussion.
To begin our discussion, I think I prepared my first question to Kevin, and it's very simple but pretty significant. Are digital assets securities under the control of SEC, or are they products under the control of CFTC?
Well, that is the question that everybody wants the answer to, and the question that the digital asset industry has been asking Congress to answer for almost a decade now. And I'm pleased to say that we are very close to having a legislative answer to that question. The problem that the industry has faced, as I'm sure everybody here knows, is that there was no clear answer to that question, and you would have to hire a team of lawyers to analyze every single project before you could use it in commerce in the United States without fear of an SEC enforcement action. And even if you got an opinion from a law firm, you're still subject to an SEC enforcement action. So what we have been asking Congress to do, and what Congress is currently working on and has passed in one chamber in the House, and what we're hoping to get passed in the Senate, is comprehensive market structure legislation, which answers that question and gives businesses a very clear, bright line as to which side of the equation they're on, so that they can plan their businesses accordingly.
Thank you so much for walking us through a brief history of recent shifts. Now I'll ask one common question to Sandra and Trish. As you know, today's topic is the US policy in the golden age of digital assets. In what sense do you think it's golden? Sandra first.
Golden age. Are we in a golden age? Well, if you asked me a year ago, I would have said it was a very challenging time, especially for those in Washington. Trish, I think you would agree with me. And it was interesting to see, more importantly, the culture shift we started seeing in January of this year, which was all of a sudden you had agencies willing to talk to you in a much more frank and open conversation around digital assets and crypto. And I'm talking every agency, and including the White House. I hadn't been to the White House before in years. I've been there twice now in 1 week, a couple months ago. It just shows you that the culture shift has happened, and along with that, a coming together of government, regulators, with a strategy on how to approach the regulatory and legislative side, but also entrepreneurs and business coming together to really bring all these pieces together. That is the golden age, not just regulation, not just the business side, but all of it coming together.
Thank you for the nice definition. What about you, Trish, sorry.
No, you're okay. Following that up, for my perspective, really, it's very similar. I would say it's been a big shift in the last year, even more so in just not just the public sector, right, the regulators, but the private industry as well. Understanding from the last couple of years the downfalls of the industry with the FTX and the Celsius and whatnot, they see a need as well. So I also see like a lot more collaboration between the public and private sector, something very much needed just because we have to have those guardrails up there at the same time that we are being innovative. So that responsible innovation, I'm seeing some underscores and exclamation points thrown on that now, and really a lot of collaboration and building together.
Trish, actually, I prepared a specific question for you because you are a tax expert, right? So you must have been working for the IRS under previous administrations. And of course, there was a huge shift from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, as Sandra just pointed out. How did you feel? I mean, honestly, looking at all the polarization, and what do you think is the most ideal picture?
Sure. So in my time at the service, there has been 4 different administrations that I've worked under. Each administration, it's like the pendulum swings, right? So it depends on a position, or it could just be depending on what's happening at that time or in that moment in history. We've seen shifts quite polarizing. We've also seen them, just dropping a position or a priority and moving to the next one. I would say in the last year that the difference mainly has been for us is obviously the IRS has, they lost a lot of resources, and so that was tough. Trying to implement something that's big next year coming out with the implementation of the 1099 DA from the 6045 regs, which we'll talk about a little later, is quite a large lift to implement on top of other things and other priorities that came forward, like the big beautiful bill and things like that. So certainly the feeling there was a lot of pressure and a lot of struggle, losing so many resources and moving that forward. So that's...
Kevin and Sandra, I think we kind of agreed that we are living in the golden age at the moment. However, can there be any going back if the Democrats come back to power?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to start. So the Trump administration, forget about what party you affiliate with. If you are a crypto company or someone who works in this space, as we all do, this has been a great administration for crypto. There's just full stop. I guess one thing that we've seen in this president, and every president to some degree, has consolidated or increased the role of the executive branch. But Donald Trump has done it in a way that nobody else has before, especially with respect to how he has reined in the administrative agencies like the CFTC, the SEC, and then there's a million federal agencies that have nothing to do with crypto, but he's centralized control of those federal agencies. And that is allowing him to implement his policy faster. And so, again, from where I sit as someone who's supportive of the digital asset industry, that's a good thing. But there's no reason to think that the next elected president won't look at what Trump has done and say, hey, that allowed him to execute on his agenda more efficiently than past presidents. So if it was good for him, it's going to be good for me, so I'm going to do that too. And the risk is that the next president is not as pro-crypto. And so Trish talked about the pendulum swinging. The pendulum always swings a bit in Washington when you go from one party to the other. But the concern would be that the pendulum swings much bigger. Mm-hmm. Now, the one saving grace in that sort of theory I've outlined is that this last election cycle in the United States was historic because the digital asset industry spoke very loudly with their wallets and contributed more money to that whole set of elections, not just the presidential election, but also to down-ticket races, Senate and Congress. And it used to be that if you were a Democrat, it was a free pass to vote against crypto. There was no negative consequence. But now there is a negative consequence. Those members or would-be members of Congress know that if you are anti-crypto, the crypto industry may well fund an opponent to you. Sherrod Brown was a very powerful senator who ran the banking committee, lost his seat to someone who'd never been in Congress, but who was a pro crypto candidate. So I think that will temper any big tide against crypto. But what we've told our clients is now is the time to build. Now is the time to really trench in so that whatever comes next, we're already too entrenched in the financial system to just roll it all the way back. Mm-hmm. So I am optimistic that we will not lose these gains that we're making right now.
Sandra?
If I could add to what Kevin has said, I don't think we should worry so much about Democrat versus Republican. I think what we need to think about from a US standpoint is the crypto and digital asset industry now is large enough that it cannot be ignored. It is now powerful enough that it could not be ignored as in previous years. The issue we will have is if we have really bad actors doing very bad things, no one will be able to truly defend another very bad situation happening out of the US. Mm-hmm. So I think that is more the risk of how far the pendulum may swing if we do not work together to protect the good actors to keep growing and for allowing innovation to happen. So I think as an industry, we've been focusing on how do we show the good things that are happening, the real problems that are being solved, the business and jobs that are being created all throughout the United States and beyond, the foreign companies who are now moving to the US to set up shop. These are all very positive things. And then to also safeguard and work with law enforcement, work with regulators against the more negative parts, including the scamming and the negative implications to consumers.
Then I think it's a good time to focus more on the remaining challenges. So Sandra, then what challenges remain regarding the current direction of digital asset regulation, in your opinion?
Well, with regulation, we know that the genius is now law, which means stablecoin payments have been clarified, though there is a whole process for actually implementing that legislation. The next big one is market infrastructure, and if anyone's been following, you know this is the big one. It's what Kevin alluded to. What is crypto? What bucket does it fall under? And which regulator will be the primary overseer of this asset? So the question now remains, do we get it done before the end of the year, as the expectation is? Does it flip into next year? The problem with next year, if we don't get it done before the next election cycle, is we could end up with a situation where there is not just a full GOP majority. So there are some interesting things, challenges to come. I think there is a high desire to get the rest of the legislation done that we need done.
Okay, Trish, do you have something to add?
Not
Not
nothing
really.
on that one. No.
Okay.
Just double tap.
I
I was trying to think through that one. Sorry, Sandra.
Yeah,
Sandra?
we're doing very good on time. So now let's talk about the strategic Bitcoin reserve, because I think it's a little bit confusing. Sometimes we hear a lot about the strategic Bitcoin reserve, but in reality, what is actually being done? So Kevin, can you also share with us?
At a very high level, it's something that Donald Trump spoke about in his campaign, and there were, as you said, there's a lot of speculation about what that might actually look like. There's been no law passed that it's done solely through an executive order, at least for now. And that executive order basically requires that the U.S. stockpile Bitcoin in a strategic reserve, but in a budget neutral way. And I think that's an important point. A lot of folks who were long Bitcoin or Ethereum were hoping that the U.S. would start buying and that would have an impact on the market. But all the U.S. is doing right now is holding on to any digital assets that it seizes through forfeiture actions and things that Trish knows a lot about. But when the government goes after a bad actor and seizes their assets, if those assets are crypto, then they would just keep those instead of traditionally they sell assets. And I mean, that's a lot of what Trish's company does, I believe. So we're not out there actively buying. At the same time, we're not selling, right? Whereas we typically auction off. You seize a yacht, you seize a car, you seize Bitcoin, it gets auctioned off. In this instance, the U.S. is holding. We're hodling. So.
Sandra, what's your take on this?
So, agree with Kevin completely. There's no law, but if you have been following Senator Cynthia Lummis out of Wyoming, she has proposed a Bitcoin reserve fund legislation. We'll have to see where that goes, but I have a feeling market infrastructure definitely trumps the Bitcoin reserve fund bill. There's also talk about a more wider, expanded version of that, which would be digital assets in general. Some people have even mentioned the concept of more of a AI emerging tech investment fund of some kind, but ultimately we'll have to see. But what I want to point out, something people always forget, is the US has 50 states with its own laws. So if you've been following that at all, you will actually see there's been a really interesting patchwork of reactions at the US state level. So a few states, by the way, it's not just red or blue, a few states have banned or have actually abandoned their proposed Bitcoin strategic funds. Others have actually advanced through that concept. So at the state level, it really depends on which state you're talking about, whether they've actually gone pro Bitcoin Reserve Fund or not.
Please keep us posted on that. So thank you. Now let's move on to the topic of stablecoin. There is a growing concern regarding stablecoin that the US dollar-based stablecoin may weaken the monetary sovereignty of the US allies, especially. Would you agree?
I think it depends on how it's implemented and how it's adopted around the world. It's definitely a way or another way for the U.S. to export the U.S. dollar. And as everybody here knows, stable coins move through the economy at a much greater velocity than traditional currencies. And so if you can facilitate payments in digital, in stable coins that are U.S. dollar backed, that's good for the U.S. dollar at the end of the day. How that plays out in other countries, I think, depends on those countries' monetary systems and their willingness to allow stablecoin in the formal sectors. So.
Sandra, would you by any chance interested in using and investing in Korean won-based stablecoin?
That's an interesting question. I would always start with the question of what is the problem or services or the intention of this stablecoin? Does it actually help facilitate trade? Will it provide jobs? Will it do something that is good for society? Then yes. But unless you can answer that question, I don't know.
Oh, I can go more specific. Then what level of freedom or autonomy would be necessary for these coins to be valuable?
When we say valuable, do we mean increase in pricing? Because at the end of the day, if you're truly doing a stable coin backed by Korean won, it should be 1-for-1. So to me, value should be, will it facilitate reduction in costs, facilitate faster movement of the money that is required for certain industries or certain sectors? I think probably for cross-border, that is probably going to be the most interesting usage. So I would love to see a use case where maybe it applies to the shipping industry that Korea leads in, and how that might be utilized for settlement across cross-borders. To me, that could be interesting.
Okay, well, understood, makes sense. I can ask you just one more question to Sandra. At this moment, which governmental body do you feel is more progressing, the US or the EU?
The US or the EU? Let's put it this way. The EU spent a lot of time putting in some pretty critical regulatory frameworks, and that's now being implemented. The US was very behind and has now just started implementing, passing one piece of the legislation and now hopefully some more. I would actually make the argument, it sounds like the US is leading, but it really depends on what you mean by that. Do you mean from a legislative standpoint? Do you mean from a regulatory standpoint? Or do you mean from a business standpoint? I would say from a regulatory standpoint, the US has done an excellent job in one area where I would recommend every government take a look at, which is look at the president's, the White House report on digital assets that just came out. It is literally a coordinated effort of US Treasury Department. You've got the CFTC, the SEC, every major agency has coordinated across and brought together this paper to now be the playbook for how the next steps will go. This is unprecedented in terms of the level of coordination and messaging on the same page.
Trish, we still want to hear from you the top priorities of IRS, even though you just left the IRS, when it comes to improving tax compliance, considering the tax gap you just mentioned, and then the decentralized transactions.
Sure. So the current priority of the IRS, or just in general, would be implementation of the broker reporting rules. So right now, in the last year, the 60/45 rules were the first legislative piece that were finalized and pushed through. They're up for 2025 was the first year that they had broker reporting to record all the transactions, and then in 2026 will be the first year that the 1099 DA will be issued to both the Internal Revenue Service and taxpayers from the centralized exchanges. The DeFi piece was carved out for now. It's been kind of kicked down the road for now. When that will be touched is, I think it's maybe 27, 28, I'm not sure. Maybe they'll line that up with CARF, but that is back in the lineup to be discussed. Again, as we talk through like the compliance and the priorities, it goes back to, we talked about the different regulators and how hard it is to get everybody on the same page, and it really is unprecedented. And I think it also, when we look back just to 2013, we saw FinCEN come out with their first piece of guidance. 2014 was IRS, and then we had a little bit of a gap there up to 2019 when the next Rev ruling came out for crypto and how they treated airdrops and staking. And part of that, this is my, looking back historically in my experiences, I think a lot of just regulators in general weren't sure what to think. Like, is this a fad? Is this going to go away? Is this here to stay? And then 2017, we saw all of these products being built, right? The ICOs. We're still seeing it happening now. So one of the things I've started kind of looking at is, who writes the rules? And in this situation or in this industry, in this asset class, it really was, code wrote the rules first. So when Bitcoin came out, they had proof of work, they had consensus, they wrote a set of rules, and then the market kind of ran with it, and the market built on top of it. So the market comes back with, now we have real-world assets, we have, the ICOs, we had swaps and DeFi and all these other things. And then regulators come in last to kind of give it, either legitimize it or say, this is or isn't the rule that should be at play. And this last year, seeing all the regulators come together, you can kind of see there's needed to be an alignment with all of them for the last, 15 years, right? But the first, 2008 was Bitcoin, and then 5 years later is when we first saw the first guidance. So the priorities really need to be giving clarity, not just to taxpayers as to what they need to report and when they need to report, but just across the whole canvas of understanding and educating taxpayers. So really that needs to be a priority, and they've made it a priority, working with both practitioners and taxpayers. And it's really the responsibility of everybody in industry as well, as we're going out there and we're talking to make sure that everybody understands their obligations for compliance.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, about the education part?
Sure. So, as you look back at the gap or the tax gap, and you see, I think it's been out there publicly, how many people check the box. So the box came on the front of the U.S. tax return, or the 1040 in 2019. And then we've added it, or they've added it in 2023 to the business returns. That was not just a, hey, did you check the box because we want to put a penalty on you if you don't later. It was an awareness as well. Like, do you know that you have a reporting obligation? In 2017, or prior to 2017, individuals thought, one token for another token meant it was a like-kind exchange, and it wasn't a taxable transaction. But the rules really state every transaction is a taxable transaction. So we had a lot of individuals who would run into situations where they're finding they did not report a lot of their income, and they're still in that situation now, not knowing what their reporting obligations are. So really being out there to educate them, and as well as practitioners. Practitioners is an interesting community, and those are the ones that would prepare the tax returns or would support a taxpayer to, either if they're under audit, those types of things. And when we were out at the nationwide tax forums, one of the number one things they would tell us is if someone told us they had crypto, or they had digital assets, or they had to say yes to the check the box, they would let them know that they couldn't prepare the return. For one, they didn't understand it, and two was the barrier to entry to understanding how to compute the basis computation. So that's really important, to be able to have a community to help taxpayers do their tax return. Taxes are very complicated, and they can get really messy really quick, and taxpayers can get in trouble pretty quick. So making sure that we have a community that's educated there, but also the taxpayers educated enough to know that just because you don't get a 1099 DA because you were doing DeFi transactions, that you still have a reportable transaction.
Sandra, I almost forgot to ask you this question on the handbook. Do you have the book with you right now?
Thank you so much. We actually just got these printed.
Yeah, and maybe people are interested in hearing about I would say, the most frequently seen use cases.
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll take a moment to explain what we did. So we talked to governments and regulators all over the world, and do you know they still ask us the question, what's real in blockchain? There are many who still think there's nothing real going on. So we said, okay, we're going to show 101 real-world use cases from all over the world that are in production, that are actually live, and put it into one book. This book, by the way, we self-published, and we've just been accepted into the Library of Congress in the United States. So now it is an official piece. Yes, thank you. And thank you to our amazing builders who are in this handbook. It's not us building, it is all of you around the world building. And so this is a truly monumental moment of not only are we for real, but number two, helping to educate regulators and government around the world. In terms of use cases that are in here, we use language that everyday people understand. So we have healthcare use cases, agriculture use cases, energy use cases. These are things that people understand. And of course, we have digital money, we have stablecoin, we have wallets, we have crypto. But we tried to expand the conversation to everyday problems, everyday sectors that people understand. By the way, we even have a section on entertainment and sports in here, which only has 2 use cases, but maybe next year we will have even more. So thank you for helping us to mention this. It's free digitally on our website, and all of our information is free because we are a nonprofit, but it is really to help people to understand that not only is it real, but it is really scaling and growing.
So it's free on your website,
Yes.
GBBC's website.
Yes.
Okay. My last question goes to Kevin. As a whole, what more can and should be done to further improve the blockchain industry overall?
Yeah, well, I think we're really, and I've been in this space for over a decade now, and it's sort of the brightest time ever in the industry. And we just can't lose momentum. What this industry has always wanted, it's, Sandra talked about, we need to avoid the bad actors and the bad uses. By and far, everybody in this industry wants to build and create value in the world. And what all these companies that are building have always asked for is clear rules of the road that make sense and that don't stifle innovation. And so, at least in the U.S., I'm very happy to see the direction we're going in. When clients ask us, what's the chance of any random bill getting passed? Usually the answer is very, very low. I am very optimistic that we are going to get this this clarity bill done, which will give us those clear rules of the road for market structure, which is what the industry really needs to flourish in the U.S.
네, 여러분께 Q&A 시간을
All right, then we wrapped up a little early so that we can take, I think, maybe a couple of questions. So if there's a question, a burning question that you really want to ask, please raise your hand. No questions? Yes, this side, front row. So who is your question for? Would love to hear that. To all three of them.
질문 답해 주실 수 있는 분이
Anyone who is willing to answer would be great. And I'd like to ask the question in English. Yeah, we'd appreciate that. Any way you prefer.
seen major housing issues recently, such as 전세 fraud, where tenants lose all their deposits due to a lack of transparency in real estate transactions. Meanwhile, globally, there's growing interest in integrating the real estate industry with blockchain, especially through RWA tokenization. Are there regulatory frameworks in the States or globally that are actively working on incorporating real estate into crypto? And how do you see crypto and RWA tokenization addressing trust and transparency issues in property markets? Thank you.
I'll take a stab at that one. So real estate in the US, there's a lot of talk. There's some tokenization, but it's not, I would call, exploding yet or scaling yet. There's actually a couple legal and I would say also potentially regulatory impediments to this group, this category scaling. But as we know, real estate is a very big market. I think also mortgages, secured lending, that financing side of real estate will also be tokenized. So I think it's not just about tokenizing property, but it's the whole life cycle of real estate markets, both residential and I would say commercial. So I think it's a laggard industry. It's coming, but it's not quite there yet. But I would expect it to come to the US and in scale over the next couple years.
If I could add on, there are one of the earliest clients that came to us around digital assets and tokenization was a company called Liquid Bricks. They came to our office, they said, we want to tokenize real estate. And we told them, well, that's great, but the thing that you create will be a security, and it will have to trade like a security. And that, at that time, was highly unattractive because there's too much regulation around it, and any value or efficiencies that you gain through tokenization were negated by the fact that that token would have to move the same way as a paper share. Now we're seeing the US SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, changing the way it looks at tokenized securities and thinking about ways to modernize their regulations to account for the efficiencies that digital assets create. So for instance, you would normally have to use a custodian and a transfer agent to transfer the security from one party to the next. Well, blockchain, you don't need a transfer agent. It transfers on chain. So as the SEC modernizes its rules, it will make those types of concepts easier to implement. And there's a company called Parcel, it's Parcl, that's doing some of that kind of stuff, real estate pricing on blockchain, allowing people to get access to or exposure to real estate through digital assets. So those are a couple thoughts.
Thank you very much for the good question. I'm sorry, but our time's up. So with this, we'll now conclude our session on U.S. policy. I'd like to thank everyone, including our distinguished panelists who flew all the way over to Seoul. I wish you a safe trip back home, and then hope to see you next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
감사합니다. 감사합니다.